You're listening to Chicago Stories, a podcast from City Hall featuring the stories of everyday Chicagoans and special guests, as told to Mayor Emanuel.
This is Emanuel, Chicago Stories. We are here with Governor-elect J.B. Pritzker. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
You excited?
I am. We got a lot to do in a short period of time.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
How does JB and MK, how did you guys get initials like this?
We just made it up as we went along.
Where does this all come from?
Well, so I've been called JB since I was born.
Really?
Because my father named me, against all Jewish tradition, named me after his living two brothers.
Yeah, that's a 10-yard violation.
Right there, yeah. But it's not actually Jewish law, just to be clear. It's just folklore.
Practice.
Yes, indeed. But he loved his older brothers a lot, Jay and Bob, so he named me after both of them. Didn't want to offend either one by calling me one or the other. So JB. And MK got her name actually in college before I met her. She, her name's
Friends from school.
Mary Catherine. People just started calling her MK. And so by the time I met her on Capitol Hill, she was working for Tom Daschle.
Are you working for Dixon or Sanford at this point?
At the time I met her, I was working for Dixon. I had worked for Terry Sanford before Dixon. But yeah, I met her when I was, and she worked on the same, or one floor below, I guess, in the same office building in Washington. And we got set up on a blind date, and the rest is history. And if you got initials, you're basically, it's a match.
You're on the 10-yard line, right over there. I didn't know that. Amy and I got on a blind date.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's how we met.
Who set you up?
You know the group Marwin.
Yeah,
Antonio Contro.
Yeah, of course.
Amy and her worked together at the Art Institute.
Terrific.
And that's how we blind date. I know you find it shocking, but she thought
that anybody would marry you. Yes.
She said she thought on the first date that I thought she was cold, and she thought I was arrogant. I know that you find that shocking, and we've never changed our opinion since.
Well, I just couldn't believe anybody as smart and beautiful as my wife would go out on a date with me. So, of course, I always tell people that she stalked me, and then finally I gave in.
Time frame between the first date and the follow-up date? We'll get to serious substance in a second, but this is more,
I would say it was days. I mean, I was very interested, but I thought I blew the first date because I forgot my wallet.
That's such a Pritzker thing to do. Did you just write your last name, Pritzker, and they find somewhere to mail the bill?
No, it's worse than that. I didn't want to admit that I forgot my wallet, so I said, "Excuse me, I'll be right back." Now, remember, we're on our first date. We just met. "Excuse me, I'll be right back." And I walked around the corner, and I broke into a sprint back to my car, which was about 4 blocks away. I'm not much of a sprinter, to be clear.
Okay, yeah.
So 4 blocks to my car, 4 blocks back. When I got back with my wallet.
Are we sweating? Is this a summer day in D.C.?
Sweating.
Is this a summer day in D.C.?
It is.
You are sweating.
And I was wheezing, and here I'm breathing hard, and she thinks I've gone to the restroom.
You are so lucky you got a second date.
I really am.
You are so lucky she didn't just get up on the first date and walk out.
Right. I'd like to say she was desperate, but she really wasn't.
You and I have talked and worked together on early childhood. I know my background, having not just with my father, but my interest from Sarah Lawrence teaching it. Where was your interest in early childhood, and how did that get sparked? And then what does that mean for what you're going to do as governor?
Well, early childhood specifically, my parents were very involved civically and charitably and in a lot of different activities that affected people's lives in a positive way. But I got involved in early childhood really because of a great philanthropist here in Chicago named Irving Harris, who you know and knew. And he became, in the last third of his life, after he'd been a very successful businessman, he decided to dedicate himself to early childhood and in particular to the most at-risk kids. So and Barbara Bowman and Irving Harris came to see me one day to tell me about early childhood, to tell me how this is an important arena that I should get involved in. And so, you can't get solicited to get involved in something by two better people than these two. So, I was sold on day one on the idea that not only is this great for kids, but it changes the trajectory of their lives. And very importantly, it's fiscally responsible. And so I just was hooked from day one. And so for more than 20 years, I've really been a locally and nationally a leader, and I've tried to make a difference in people's lives.
What do you think you want to do as governor on that issue?
Well, I think we need universal preschool and, quality childcare also. And these are things that, unfortunately, 20 years ago, this wasn't a top of the list of issues for state government, let alone anybody else. Now, as you know, for many people, it's top of the list. And I like to say I participated in trying to make it that. I remember, by the way, that you and I were at a Clinton Global Initiative event here in Chicago, and I had just given a speech about early childhood and about the social impact bonds. And I came off the stage, and you were yelling at one of your staff people, saying, well, he just announced that he did something in Utah. We wanted to be first. How come he's first in Utah and he lives in Chicago? And you're yelling at him.
I've always been a middle child. So let me ask you a question. You've been successful, obviously, now in political life, public life. You've been, and you haven't been, meaning you ran for Congress and didn't. You've been successful in business. I assume there's some setbacks.
Oh, yeah.
So which are the setbacks you think that you've learned the most, and what did you learn from them? In either arena. Obviously, your most greatest success is getting married to MK after that first date fiasco.
Clearly, every date before that was a failure.
Exactly. But which of your setbacks, failures, disappointments you think prepared you for success in life, if you think they did?
Yeah. I'll be honest with you. I think it dates back much earlier than those things. My father passed away when I was 7. He was 39, but he had been, literally one of the most successful businessmen in America. He, starting with a motel, built one of the fastest growing motel chains, and then it became, they bought a hotel, and then it became one of the fastest growing hotel chains in America. And he was 26 when he started, and 39 when he passed away. And so I had, I was only 7 when he passed away, but he had been hugely successful, and then he disappeared. He passed away, and then my mother was just devastated by this, and she was an alcoholic. And so my brother and sister and I, for the next 10 years, really, pulled together. We were a team. We were kind of sometimes managing my mother, when she was not well, and when she was well, she was terrific. She was an amazing mother, and she was politically active, and and one of the smartest people that to this day, one of the smartest people I've ever met. But she passed away 10 years, almost to the day that my father passed away. And
to the day?
Almost to the day, one day different, I think that going through all the things that we went through when I was in my teens, dealing with my mother's alcoholism, and those challenges, understanding what she was going through, because to be honest with you, she's my hero. I mean, this is a disease, and people struggle with this all over the world. And she was trying so hard. She had young children. She's got a disease she's trying to overcome. She wanted to be a better mother than she felt like she was. And I think the experience of watching her, helping her, trying to lift her up, working with my brother and sister and trying to, deal with that, I think that has made me somebody who's optimistic. Strangely, after going through all those things, I think just living through fighting through some of that, I was, it was obviously very hard. But
did she struggle all 10 years post your dad?
Yeah, like a lot of people, she was on the wagon, off the wagon. She struggled in that sense. She checked herself into treatment centers. Sometimes she went to Alcoholics Anonymous. She gave us books. I remember distinctly her sitting us down one day. And I just can't imagine being a parent and doing this, but how brave this was. She sat us down, she gave us each a book that she had found about alcoholism, something that was understandable for us as teenagers. And she said, I want you to read this book, because I want you to understand that this is a disease, and that when I'm not being a good mother, and I want to be the best mother I can be, that this is what I'm going through, and I need you to understand that it's, the things that I do, it's not because I don't love you, it's because I'm struggling. And as a parent,
that's ahead of her time.
It is, and imagine now. I mean, I'm a parent now of teenagers, and I think my kids see me as somebody who's undaunted and trying hard, working hard in the world, and succeeding, and so on. and to sit down in front of your children, and admit your toughest, I don't know if it's a flaw, but the thing your vulnerability. I think that's the right way to say it. That's brave. That's just brave. So, so you ask me, what failings or difficulties you go through in life that make you more successful. I think that made me learn, to be optimistic, to try to, to see somebody try to overcome. She wasn't able to. It was tragic. I think it made me want to try to overcome, and then add to that over the course of your life you have failures. Yeah. I mean, running for Congress as I did 20 years ago and losing, you learn lessons. Losing is often a bigger educational experience than winning. Yeah. So you learn what your own failures are. You try to learn from those, and try not to blame other people, but instead look inside and say, what could I do differently? So I learned from that, and I think one of the things I learned certainly from running for Congress is that you can have all the best ideas, or you can feel like you have the best ideas and you can go fight for them, but you need more than that if you want to win public office. You need to be able to, just like somebody building a small business, you need to build the infrastructure to win a campaign, and it's not enough just to have good ideas and to try to go convince people.
Was your I'm not saying we're going to do the Pritzker family history, that we don't have that much time in this show, but you and Penny obviously are involved in public life. That's not true of other elements of the Pritzker family. Does that all come from your mother? I don't want to say all, but she was the political activist in the Pritzker.
My father too. My father was the finance chair for Ed Muskie when he ran for president, senator from Maine.
Don't worry, I got that part.
But other people may not. And was the finance chair also for a Senate candidate.
So he was there in 72 in New Hampshire in the tears?
72, he was there, yeah. I don't know if he was in New Hampshire, but yeah, he was with him in spirit anyway. Yeah. And also forgot him, John Tunney, who became a U.S. senator. Yeah. Gene Tunney, the boxer's son, who had been a congressman running for the United States Senate. He won. My father was his finance chair. My mother was, we were licking envelopes and stamps. We were knocking on doors for Tom Hayden, and other progressive Democrats. Yeah, very involved. So,
always in the
always Democrats. Yeah. I have relatives who are Republicans. Actually, my parents got up and moved because the first motel was in California. And so I was actually born in California, even though both my parents spoke with a Chicago accent. And, I grew up in a home that was kind of a Chicago home, but it was in California. And so that they left, and they were Democrats, and others, like my grandfather, he was more of a Republican. And so, but I grew up in a very Democratic household. So people like Nancy Pelosi and Barbara Boxer, I knew of them when they were, supervisors, on the county board and that sort of thing out in California.
JB, when you look forward, as Illinois, we went through it already 4 years with a business person who becomes governor. What do you want to show the folks of the state as it relates to, how you're going to be different, or what you want to do different stylistically, substantively, obviously different policies? Give them the sense of confidence that this is not, a person who's never been in politics, right, but you're the chief executive of the state.
Right. Well, during the campaign, you can imagine I had to explain that to a lot of people, right? Here we have a failed president in Washington, D.C., who's, a businessman, and a failed governor in Springfield who's a businessman, and here comes another businessman, and you say, well, how are you going to be different? And I think it comes down to values and what you've been fighting for over your course of your life. And, people have to understand, that I've been, when you're 20 years in early childhood education and actually making a difference and making early childhood one of the leading issues in the nation. In this last election cycle, I think most of the people running for governor around the nation actually had an early childhood platform and have an intention to implement it. And so, what you've been doing during the course of your life is, I think, indicative. What values you've demonstrated fighting for working families is indicative of who you will be, right? It's past performance is in some ways indicator of future results.
It's a flashlight into the future.
It is, I think so, an indicator. And so, whether you're a businessman or have any other, profession, what have you been doing to help people over the course of your life? And it's not as a philanthropist. I think people sometimes assume it's just, JB wrote checks or something, for these things. The things that I've talked about, 1871 here in Chicago is
familiar with it.
It's I know you are, and it's the #1 incubator in the world, and it's right here in Chicago, and that wasn't something that JB wrote a check and there it appeared. You've got to bring people together. I came to talk to you when I was putting it together.
When I was first ran for mayor.
That's right.
It was one of the first things you talked about.
It was, and I went to the governor too, and I brought together leaders in the tech community and big company leaders and so on. And, it takes a lot of work to bring people together around an idea and then to move people in the right direction. You provide vision leadership to get things done. So these are the kinds of things that I've worked on during the course of my life. And I think they're kind of indicators. And those are things that I talked about during the campaign. These are public policy matters. We're creating a tech community. We're creating jobs, right? This is good for our civic life in Chicago and in the state. And early childhood, same thing. I mean, you can truly save money in your budget if you lift up at-risk kids. So these are things I've worked on as a policy matter for many years, and that I think those are the things that people I think latched onto during the course of the campaign.
Is there any issue in the campaign you wish you had talked more about that you didn't have? I mean, sometimes I've been through a campaign, you've been through a campaign. Things get narrowcast pretty quickly to the standard kind of 10 issues or 5 issues. Is there something you wish you had more time you would have gone into depth on or talk longer about? Or
it was a long campaign.
I'm well aware,
Mr. Mayor, and I think it was from the time that I started thinking about it to the election, almost 22 months, and so there was a lot of talking during the course of that campaign, the primary, the general election. What I regret in some ways is just what you just said, which is things get narrowcast
very quickly.
So it's not as if I didn't talk about things during the campaign that I want people to pay attention to, but what I have found is that it didn't get enough attention. I'll give you an example, actually. Just maybe a little vignette, which is I rolled out my early childhood policy, which is something I know an awful lot about. And I put
I can attest to that.
A lot of time, effort, and energy into making sure that we've got a comprehensive plan. And we set up a press conference, and we had the people who are going to help us do it there, and early childhood leaders, and we showed up, and literally not a single member of the press came. And I mean, it's not like we didn't let everybody know, but I said, why? Because early childhood just doesn't do it for the members of the media. It just doesn't.
You know what I found out the trick is?
What's that?
Only invite the reporters that have kids that are below the age of 3. You'll find out that they're very interested in it.
In early childhood.
People that wrote about it when I talked about it actually had kids, and they know that it costs $13,000 for finding childcare. Yeah, invite the reporters who have kids below the ages of 6 or 7, and you'll find very interested people in the subject.
Among political reporters,
you are totally right.
None of them, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, no, but you are very right. If they don't have kids or some kind of relationship to the topic,
that's right.
They don't think it's core. But it is very core to the public.
Yeah, although they showed up at other, when I was announcing that I favor legalizing, recreational marijuana and things like that, they seemed interested in those topics. But early childhood, which could truly change the trajectory of our state and the people of our state,
did you?
Nobody showed.
Did you see what former Governor Hickenlooper from Colorado said as it relates to legalization?
I did.
Is there any kind of flashing yellow light about that subject to you?
Yes.
So when you think about it, is there something from other people that you want to learn and say, if we're going to do this, we should have some bumpers on either side of this?
Well, let me start with when you're first, you're likely to make more mistakes than if you're 5th or 6th or 8th. And so they did in Colorado make some mistakes, and that happens. I likened it to somebody earlier today. They were asking me about this, and I likened it to, I don't know if you know that before there was Facebook, before there was MySpace, there was a social network called Friendster. And it was a kind of a hot new thing, and people joined it and so on. Have you heard of Friendster? No. because it was first, and they made all the mistakes. And then MySpace came along, and they fixed some of the mistakes and did it better. And then Facebook looked at the mistakes MySpace made, and they did it better. And when you're eighth or whatever to legalize recreational marijuana, you can look at all the regulatory systems out there and make sure you're doing it right. It's true that Colorado's had some problems. Washington State, on the other hand, they did it much better. And so there's not been, for example, any expansion of use by teens as a result of legalization there. And other states, have put in regulatory systems that make sense to me. And then there's the taxation system. How much do you tax these things so that you can avoid having a black market? And so you learn from all of those things. And so I think we have the advantage in many ways of learning from those mistakes and maybe being the first in the Midwest to have it. So I think, we can get it done and do it safely. Are you
suggesting that's going to be a tourism attraction?
I'm not suggesting any of that. I'm just saying that given that we want to attract people to our state, maybe there's a reason people will move here.
Are you worried at all that the Democrats have too big a majority in the House and Senate?
Look, I'm a Democrat. I want Democrats to win, and so to me, there are never too many Democrats. Right. We roughly share the same values across the Democratic Party, and I've talked about those during the course of the campaign, but it's the kitchen table issues that really matter. And so I think we're going to get a lot done to raise wages in the state, to lower the cost of health care, to make college more affordable. Those are basic things that we need to do that weren't done under the Republican leadership prior. So I think we've got a lot of opportunity. I mean, is there danger? I don't know. I mean, we'll see, but I really don't think so. I think I was very proud to lead the blue wave here in Illinois, and I think we had probably the biggest blue wave, in the country.
And my point is, maybe this is a little from my presidential years, and where is that sometimes when you think you have too much numbers, you get a hubris that comes associated with that, and a sense that you can just do anything and you don't make real fundamental choices. But that's not like a flashing light for you.
Look, I made clear what my priorities are, and I campaigned with many of these people that won. And so their priorities, to many of them, are my priorities. And so I think having that cadre of new talent in Springfield to go with some of the older talent that already exists, I think we're going to get a lot done, and I'm not as worried as you seem to be.
I'm not worried. I'm just asking about it. Let me ask you a question. When you look at the pension issue, anything that comes to mind that hasn't been talked about, how you want to look at it?
I've talked about it quite a lot. I think it is clear that if we want to approach the budget the right way and make sure we're actually balancing the budget, that we've got to address this challenge that we've got. And so there are a number of plans out there that I've pointed to that I think would make sense for us to deal with it. But the thing I won't tolerate is us taking away people's pensions, when they're getting ready to retire and have saved just the right amount of money to go with their pension so they can retire in the way they want to, and then just say to them, as I think others have, well, we might take 20 or 30% of that away from you while you're retiring. So now the question is, how do you change things going forward to balance the budget? And I think we can do that. I think we're going to have to look at the amortization schedule, the amount of money we're putting in to raise that up, and this is all one budget, though. People like to think, well, what are you going to do about pensions? Well, it's also what are you going to do about a lot of other things to balance the budget? Because even in the current year's budget for the state of Illinois, there's about a $2 billion gap. It's, as you know, they've sold the Thompson Center at least twice now. And so
to two different buyers.
To two different buyers who don't exist. So, there are a lot of kind of things in the budget that I think we need to fix.
When you think, I read somewhere, every Pritzker on their bar bat mitzvah was given a book.
Yes.
What's your one takeaway from that book from Grandpa Pritzker?
Yeah, you're referring to a book called 30 After 10, which you can only understand the meaning of when you're 13. Anyway, so he was 70 years old when he wrote it. It was my great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather.
Yep, Nicholas Pritzker. And this is I talked about him a little bit on the campaign trail. He arrived here with nothing, and, it was really the generosity of the people of Chicago and of Illinois that allowed him to survive. And that book which is really his journey and our family's history, it's not published anywhere. You can't buy it anywhere. It's literally just something that you get in my family when you're 13 years old. It's had a huge impact. Knowing who you are and where you came from, and understanding the difficulty and the journey that allowed you to be here, and especially as a Jew whose family survived a pogrom. I think it gives you a perspective that without it you wouldn't have, and it makes me want to protect immigrants that come to this country and to this state. It makes me understand better the drive to survive and to succeed that many of them have, and so I feel empowered by that.
Why did the Pritzker family come to Chicago? I mean, I know my own history, which is my grandfather knew an uncle, or that didn't know him, but he was told to come and meet him. So why Chicago?
It was an accident. What I mean is that there was an organization, actually the one that was
Hayes?
Yes, the organization that this
in Pittsburgh.
This person that the Pittsburgh massacre called out, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. The way it worked was you had to have a sponsor in the United States. Usually somebody in the United States would say, okay, I'll sponsor a refugee. And so my family came over because of that sponsor, arrived in the hometown of that sponsor, Clinton, Iowa. Got off the train in Clinton, Iowa, and were greeted by this family and found out that there were no jobs in Clinton, Iowa. It was nice that they invited them to stay with them, but at some point they needed jobs. So
did they have a minion in Clinton, Iowa?
When my family arrived, they did. So finding out that there were no jobs, they said, well, where's the nearest big city so we can go get a job? And it was Chicago. And so they got back on the train with what little they had,
They came back.
Because they had come through Chicago. You're right. So came back to Chicago and lived in the basement of the Chicago train station to start with, because they had no place to stay. And then it was a social service agency that gave them a place to live, and public school that gave them an education and so on. And so that's how we ended up in Chicago. And again, it was an accident.
Where did the family's culture around philanthropy come from?
My great-grandfather. The book that you referenced, he talks a lot about the obligation, even when he had very little, the obligation to give back, to stand up for your community and for the people of Chicago. And so he was involved in an orphanage. When he started to make a little bit of money, he led this orphanage board on the north side of Chicago, and it's ingrained in all of us that this is what you do. And I think it's part of our religion, too. I think our faith teaches us that we have an obligation to stand up for social justice, and whether you have resources or not. And so as our family has had more resources, we've been able to do more.
When you go in front of the voters 4 years from now, I know it's hard to say that just a week after the last one, what do you want them to know what J.B. Pritzker did?
Yeah. What do I want to have accomplished?
And what do you want them to know? Yeah.
Yeah. I think that we've got to. I think at that point, I'll try to look back from that point. I think I would like to be able to say that we put our state on a sounder fiscal footing, and that has allowed us to expand healthcare coverage and expand, availability of MAP grants and the capability for people to go to college. And then jobs. I spent my whole career helping people start and build companies. I've started and built a company, and we've got to create jobs in this state. You've done such a great job of attracting companies to Chicago. We need to do more, and we need to do more everywhere else in the state too. And it's funny that, my predecessor is a business person, and everybody kind of assumed that he'd be able to create jobs, but that's not really the business that he was in. And actually the business I've been in has been helping other people create jobs. So that's, I think, a beneficial thing to have learned over a long career.
We worked on SMS, the
right, and others. There are lots of companies. I think you went to see Signal in its early days when it was called One Tag or Bright Tag or something. And when you were running, in fact, you asked me, I want to talk to you asked me, I want to talk to an engineer who could have left the city but chose not to, and find out why? What is it that keeps them here? And you went and met with a guy named Eric Lunt.
Yes.
And his company's been hugely successful. Hundreds of jobs have been created here. It's now a very valuable company. And I think you took a lot of the lessons away from just those intimate conversations with people, finding out why would you want to stay here? What is it? And I think Eric gave you some good ideas.
There's 3 companies, SMS, the pallet company that moved from Pennsylvania here. That's
Payco,
on this,
pallet, yeah.
And then you introduced me to Braintree.
Yeah.
And then we started working on 1871. Those are all the 3 things. I mean, different company. I could testify exactly. And you are right, as I asked Mr. Lunt, why you stayed here rather than leave on this effort. When you look at Illinois' strengths, what do you see as our core capacity economically, and how did then we build on that as a state to attract exactly the businesses?
We have great colleges and universities. Let's start with that. I mean, we are producing talent at a rate that's, not unlike most other places, all across the state too. And I know, you've often said that, Chicago is the biggest college town in America. That's true, but we've also got great universities, Southern Illinois University, the directional universities, University of Illinois. So that's core to who we are, and we've got to invest in that. You can't divest and think that you're solving a problem. You're not. So that's a hugely important asset that attracts people. I think so. Talent. I think the second thing is there's a dynamism that exists in various places around the state around entrepreneurship. And we've got to feed on that, help people. When most of the jobs get created by people who are, wake up in the morning and say, I think I'll take a risk and quit my job and start something. That when most of the jobs get created by people who are doing that, let's help them. It's hard enough to take that risk. So there's a lot that we can do to kind of feed into that. But the core assets, look at where we're located. We're on the biggest body of fresh water around, or one of them. And, we have so many assets. I love, being able to sell Illinois to people. And I'm shocked.
That will be a fresh... That will be a fresh start. That is somebody that will sell Illinois. There's a beginning.
I want to.
That's a concept we haven't tried in a while.
I told you I'm an optimist, but it's more than that. I see what it is that's great about our state, and some of it is our people, which is the best thing to sell. But it's also like we just have so many things going for us, and. Look, I understand it's a little like, family or anything else. You have your own challenges inside your home, or you have your own challenges, inside the state that we're dealing with and so on. But that does not mean that you need to be down in the mouth out in the world, because we've got a lot going for us.
Yep.
And so I intend to be, as I've said along the campaign trail, the best chief marketing officer the state's ever had.
That's a fresh start. I can attest to that. So, all right, we're going to do a lightning round real quick.
Uh-oh.
Don't worry.
Am I going to get struck by lightning? Or
No, it's a lightning round. You can handle this. It's
Okay.
going to be a lot quicker than the 4 blocks back and forth from the car, okay? Cubs or Sox?
Cubs.
Okay, that's okay.
But I'm for all teams in Illinois. Just so you know.
I can say that. That was a Clinton answer. All right, Sears or Hancock?
I can't even call it. Sorry.
You can pick.
I really have to pick a building.
Which one do you like? Yeah.
Well, wait. Do I have to go with the old name or the new name when
you can
I
go
pick
with
it?
Willis Hancock. We'd call it Sears or
Isn't
Hancock.
Hancock looking to change its name now?
It hasn't yet.
Okay. All right. I don't know. I live closer to Hancock.
Okay, there it is. Thick or thin pizza?
I hate to say thin pizza because I know so many people
don't worry about it. Lake or river?
Lake.
Okay. 12-inch or 16-inch softball?
16-inch.
There it is. You got it. You pass with flying colors. J.V. Pritzker, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You've been listening to Chicago Stories with Mayor Emanuel. You can subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts and tweet your guest ideas using #ShyStories. Thanks for listening.